The fluorescent lights of the university hallway felt like a spotlight on my success. I, Maya, at 23, stood in my crisp cap and gown, ready to walk the stage. This computer science degree, earned while juggling classes and 2 demanding jobs in Chicago, wasn't just a piece of paper. It was my liberation. It was the proof that I had succeeded despite my parents, Richard, 58, and Carol, 55, career accountants who measured worth in profit margins, not perseverance. My father, Richard, used to say, "Love is a strong investment, Maya, and we expect a strong return." A week before the ceremony, that investment came with a price tag. My mother, Carol, called not to discuss her flight, but to recite the exact financial burden of their attendance, $2,100. The flights, rental car, and the 2 nights at the hotel came out to precisely $1,050 per person. She stated, her voice as cold as a calculator screen, "We just wanted to ensure you understood the cost of us being there." My heart seized with a familiar, suffocating anxiety. They were making the price of their presence explicit. I swallowed the raw emotion, assuring her I appreciated the sacrifice. I needed them there. I needed that validation. I desperately clung to the belief that seeing me cross that stage would finally bridge the emotional gap we'd always had, converting their financial expectation into genuine parental pride. I had reserved the best seats, meticulously planned the dinner, and prepared a speech for them. I truly thought this day was about me. I was wrong. The $2,100 they so clinically itemized was not the price of their attendance. It was the exact down payment on a stunning, cruel betrayal they were already executing back in Ohio. That specific brutal number was about to become the weapon they would use to try and take down the one thing they couldn't control, my success.
Graduation day. The air in the auditorium was thick with anticipation and the smell of cheap polyester gowns. I, Maya, felt a surge of nervous energy as I scanned the audience for the 2 reserved seats in the front row. They were still empty. I clutched the program in my hand, repeating the mantra. "They're stuck in traffic. The flight was delayed." As thousands of cheering families erupted around me, my own silence felt deafening. The speaker droned on. My anxiety twisted into a cold, heavy lump in my stomach. The moment came. "Maya, computer science, magna cum laude." I walked across the stage, the cheers a distant noise. I forced a brilliant smile for the camera, the one they would have bought copies of, but my eyes darted one last time to the empty seats. They were still vacant. The validation I had spent 4 years fighting for felt hollowed out. It wasn't until I was back at my tiny apartment, hours after the ceremony, staring at the untouched celebratory cake, that the text finally came. It wasn't a call, which would have required genuine emotion, but a text from Carol. It was brief and brutally clinical. "Flights were delayed due to unforeseen maintenance. We decided it wasn't fiscally prudent to rebook at the last minute and lose money on the non-refundable hotel room. Congratulations on the degree. Your father and I are proud of your future potential." My despair turned instantly into a searing rage. The fiscally prudent part struck me with the force of a physical blow. They weren't sorry they missed my biggest achievement. They were only concerned about losing the $2,100 they had spent. The fact that they hadn't even called before the ceremony confirmed it. They simply chose the cheapest exit. The text was an insult wrapped in corporate jargon. The pain of the neglect was superseded by the sheer contempt for my achievement. My immediate resolution was clear. I would sever the financial cord and walk away. I began drafting an email to refund them the $2,100 just to be rid of the debt and the emotional leverage. But before I could hit send, they contacted me, not to take the money, but to demand a stunning additional sum. The $2,100 they missed spending was about to be weaponized in the cruelest way possible.
I was still reeling from the shock of the empty chairs and their fiscally prudent text when my phone rang the next morning. it was Carol. I answered, expecting a belated, genuine apology. What I received was an invoice. "We need you to transfer the $2,100 immediately, Maya," she commanded, her voice sharp and entirely professional. "We've adjusted our ledger." My confusion was profound. Transfer? Mom, you said you paid for the trouble. I was going to send you the money back to compensate for the lost funds, but why are you demanding it? "We're demanding it because we lost it," she snapped, and I could hear the forced exasperation in her tone. "We can't recoup the hotel or the rental car deposits. That money is gone, and thanks to the inconvenience of your graduation date, we were forced to cancel. It's a direct loss to our financial plan. We view this as a necessary reimbursement for the financial sacrifice we made for your supposed success." The sheer, staggering audacity of the demand left me momentarily speechless. They missed my biggest day, insulted me with a cold text, and were now demanding I pay for their self-imposed inconvenience? They weren't just asking me to accept their neglect, they were asking me to subsidize it. The $2,100 wasn't a fee, it was a punishment for forcing them to spend their money on something that didn't generate immediate profit. You're asking me, your daughter, to pay you back for a trip you chose not to take to my college graduation? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. After you stood me up? That money was supposed to be for you to share my moment. It was our money, Maya, and it was tied up for an event we didn't attend, Richard interjected, his voice firm and final. We need those funds liquid immediately for an unforeseen expense. Wire it today or we'll consider this a debt. The phrase unforeseen expense was the first real crack in their accountant facade. They didn't just want the money for principal, they needed it for something else. I knew my sister, Chloe, 19, art student, who still lived at home, was always the center of their immediate, uncatalogued financial attention. Suddenly, the $2,100, that exact clinical number, had a secondary, far darker meaning. My parents hadn't missed my graduation to save a few bucks. They missed it because they had already diverted the funds to serve Chloe, and they desperately needed me to replenish their bank account before the truth came out. The coldness in Richard and Carol's voices, their desperate need for the funds to be liquid immediately, clued me in. This wasn't about the $2,100. It was about a crisis they created. I, Maya, decided to use the skills from my computer science degree and my inherent analytical mind against them. My target was the family's most immediate and frequent financial black hole, my younger sister, Chloe, 19, art student. Chloe was their favorite, still living at home and having her way paid for. I logged into an old, shared family photo album and began meticulously scrolling through her recent posts. She hadn't posted anything about my graduation, of course, but she had posted constantly about her new car. She drove a perfectly functional old sedan, but for weeks, she'd been hinting about needing an upgrade for her art supplies and inspirations. And then I saw it. A flurry of photos posted just 3 days before my graduation, the exact window when my parents claimed their flights were delayed. The pictures were of a gleaming, brand new crimson compact SUV. The caption read, "Thanks to Mom and Dad for helping me buy this inspiration station. So worth the trip to the dealership. Hello, freedom." But the real evidence was in the next photo, a blurry shot of the SUV's leather interior and the financing paperwork lying on the console. Zooming in and enhancing the image, I recognized my father, Richard's distinct notary stamp and the specific $2,100 figure written next to down payment. My heart didn't sink. It froze. The cold, sickening truth crystallized instantly. They hadn't missed my graduation to save money on a hotel room. They missed it because they were at the dealership using the money they had budgeted for their trip to Chicago, the money they were now demanding I refund, to put a down payment on a flashy, unnecessary new car for Chloe. The $2,100 wasn't lost funds. It was a debt they created for Chloe's comfort and were now demanding I service. They prioritized a car upgrade for a sister who is still living off them over attending their oldest daughter's once-in-a-lifetime achievement. The ghosting wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate, self-serving financial transaction. I felt a surge of white-hot fury. The silence of the empty chairs at my graduation was now replaced by the deafening sound of their calculated hypocrisy. The polite email of severance was dead. A war was about to begin.
The discovery, the irrefutable photographic evidence of Chloe's new crimson SUV and the $2,100 down payment, shredded the last thread of filial obligation Maya, felt. They had traded my validation for Chloe's comfort. My initial plan to refund them the money died instantly, replaced by a fierce, righteous coldness. I sat down and typed a final, unsparing email to Richard and Carol. This wasn't a desperate plea, it was a verdict. I used the language they understood best, accounting and evidence. To Richard and Carol, accountants, I began. I have received your demand for the immediate transfer of $2,100, citing lost funds due to your absence from my graduation. I will not be remitting this payment. I then delivered the emotional and financial blow. My decision is based on verified ledger entries. Your absence was not due to unforeseen maintenance, but a deliberate choice to divert the funds allocated from my graduation to a down payment on Chloe's new SUV, documented via her social media post on date and time. I can confirm the down payment amount was precisely $2,100. The email continued, cutting them out of my life with the same surgical precision they used to cut me out of theirs. Your inability to be fiscally prudent enough to save $2,100, even for your own daughter's benefit, proves your priorities. You chose a car over my life's milestone. Therefore, any perceived debt is nullified by your emotional and ethical insolvency. I consider the ledger between us cleared. I owe you nothing, and you owe me the right to pursue my success free of your conditional demands. I concluded with a final, unyielding statement. Do not contact me again via any medium. This conversation is closed. I didn't wait for a reply. I blocked their emails, their phone numbers, and every social media account they owned. The silence that followed the send button wasn't the agonizing emptiness of graduation day. It was the peace of absolute closure. I had severed the financial leash they had tried to use for 23 years. I had established the boundary. I expected them to stew, to fume, perhaps to contact Chloe to complain. I did not expect the sheer, shocking escalation they would employ when they realized their financial control and their precious $2,100 was truly lost. Their next move would prove just how far they would go to protect their money and their damaged egos. I expected a furious reply to my email, a tirade about disrespect or my unreasonable refusal. Instead, I got silence, which was far more unsettling. For 3 weeks, nothing. I, Maya, began my new job in the tech sector, finally putting my computer science degree to use. The future I had worked for was finally beginning, and the distance from my parents' emotional debt was palpable. Then, the silence broke in the most devastating way possible. Professional sabotage. My new supervisor, Miss Lynn, called me into her office, her expression tight. Maya, I need to know the context of your relationship with Richard and Carol in Ohio, she said, placing a notepad on the desk. They've called the office twice this morning, claiming you're unstable and have significant unresolved financial debts that could compromise your employment. My stomach dropped. They couldn't hit me emotionally anymore, so they went for my livelihood. My father, Richard, the accountant, had used his professional voice to cast doubt on my reliability, attempting to poison my professional reputation before it even began. He knew exactly what language would spook a new employer. I took a deep breath, fighting back the rising panic. Miss Lynn, my parents are not stable, and their claims are malicious retaliation. I stated calmly, drawing on the cold confidence I'd used in my refusal email. I briefly explained the $2,100 demand, the ghosted graduation, and their motive to recover funds they diverted for my sister's car. They're attempting to coerce me into paying a sum of money I do not owe by leveraging your concerns.
I have the documented proof of their financial claim and my refusal. Miss Lynn, clearly a savvy professional, looked skeptical but agreed to give me time. I immediately realized I needed to secure definitive evidence of their harassment. I set up my phone to record all incoming calls from an unknown number. I couldn't stop them from attacking me, but I could weaponize their cruelty against them. That afternoon, they called. This time, Carol was on the line, and her professionalism had dissolved into desperation. Maya, if you think you can just ignore us and start your life, you are wrong. That money is ours. If you don't transfer the $2,100 by the end of the day, Richard is going to take this to a legal level you will regret. You will not ruin your father's financial reputation by making him lose this money. I let her rage and her threats spool out, the tiny red REC icon on my phone glowing reassuringly. They were escalating the fight, but they were also giving me the necessary proof that their motive was purely vindictive and financial, not parental. They were setting the stage for the final, shocking plot twist that would involve law enforcement and my absolute justification.
I thought I had prepared for everything. The emotional withdrawal, the professional sabotage, but nothing prepared me for the sheer, unbelievable audacity of their next move. It happened late one evening. I was reviewing some code for my new job when my phone flashed with an incoming voicemail from an Ohio number. It wasn't Richard or Carol calling directly. It was a number I didn't recognize, likely a burner phone or a corporate line. I hit play, and Carol's voice, distorted by fury and desperation, filled the room. "Maya," she hissed, abandoning all professional pretense, "you have forced our hand. You committed theft by refusing to return the $2,100 which was legally ours. We filed a formal report with the Ohio Police Department detailing the stolen funds and your refusal to cooperate. You have 24 hours to wire the full amount, or we will be filing an interstate report detailing your exact address in Chicago. You will be arrested for fraud and theft. You will not ruin your career with a criminal record over $2,100. My blood ran cold. They weren't just leveraging professional sabotage. They were weaponizing the legal system against their own daughter over a down payment for a car. Their entire threat was based on a lie, claiming I stole the money when I simply refused to be extorted for their non-attendance. But they were accountants. They know how to make a fraudulent claim sound legitimate, relying on the fear and hassle of dealing with law enforcement across state lines. The silence that followed the recording was terrifying. I listened again, focusing on the words, fraud, theft, arrested. The fear was paralyzing. But beneath it, the cold, analytical part of my brain kicked in. They had just given me a gift, irrefutable evidence of malicious intent. I immediately saved the voicemail. I emailed the audio file to myself, labeling it evidence of coercion and extortion. I then compiled all my existing evidence, the text message confirming their fiscally prudent absence, the photos of Chloe's new SUV with the $2,100 down payment, and my final refusal email. I had proof that their claim was not only false, but was entirely fabricated after I refused their financial demand. They were not victims of theft. They were perpetrators of attempted fraud. I knew I couldn't ignore the police threat. They were dangerous enough to follow through. But I also knew I wouldn't pay them a cent. I had the truth, and I had the documented receipts. I prepared for the ultimate confrontation, knowing that the police were about to walk into a family conflict that was a direct result of my parents' astonishing greed. The next morning, I, Maya, was sitting at my kitchen table reviewing my evidence files when there was a sudden, insistent knock on my apartment door in Chicago. My heart hammered, adrenaline spiking. I knew who it was. My parents had followed through. I cautiously opened the door to find two Chicago Police Department officers standing there. The lead officer, a stern-faced woman, held a notepad. "Are you Maya last name?" she asked. "We received a fraud report filed out of Ohio. Your parents, Richard and Carol, claim you illegally retained $2,100 that they had advanced you for travel expenses, a sum they now require back for an urgent financial obligation."
The shock was immense, but I was prepared. I invited the officers inside, maintaining a professional calm that belied the terror churning in my gut. I looked at the officer and then addressed the actual crime. Officers, I'm happy to cooperate fully. However, my parents' claim is malicious and entirely fraudulent. They are attempting to coerce me into paying a debt I do not owe by using the threat of law enforcement. I presented my file. I started with Carol's voicemail, playing the portion where she explicitly threatened me with arrest for theft if I didn't wire the money for these stolen funds. Then I handed the officer the photos of Chloe's new crimson SUV and the zoomed-in picture of the $2,100 down payment receipt. My parents were not delayed. I explained calmly. They missed my graduation to buy my sister a car. They used the funds budgeted for their trip to do it. They are demanding that I, the daughter they stood up, repay them for the down payment they chose to make. The $2,100 they claim I stole is the amount they chose to spend frivolously. The officers exchanged a look of disbelief. The stark contrast between my calm, evidence-based presentation and the absurdity of the original complaint was undeniable. One officer reviewed the documentation, nodding slowly. So they filed a theft report because you refused to pay them back for money they chose to spend on a car for your sister, he summarized. My parents, the career accountants, had just been legally dismantled by my computer science-trained logic. The police weren't there to arrest me. They were there to witness the final humiliating exposure of my parents' conditional love.
The Chicago Police Department officers finished reviewing the evidence on my kitchen table. The proof was stacked high. The voicemail recording, Chloe's celebratory social media posts detailing the $2,100 down payment, and my parents' own cold text message citing fiscally prudent reasons for their absence. The absurdity of their claim that I, Maya, had stolen money they chose to spend on a car for my sister was undeniable. The lead officer snapped her notebook shut, her expression one of professional frustration. Ms. Last Name, there is no basis for a theft report here, she stated firmly. This is clearly a civil dispute rooted in family conflict, and the claim of theft appears to be an attempt at coercion. We will be filing a full report detailing our findings and alerting the Ohio Police Department that this complaint is unfounded. She then delivered the final, humiliating blow for Richard and Carol. We are also issuing a serious warning to your parents regarding the filing of false police reports. Attempting to weaponize law enforcement across state lines over a personal dispute is a serious misuse of resources and is punishable. If they contact this department again with this claim, they will face charges. The officers left, and the silence that filled my apartment was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It wasn't the agonizing silence of the empty seats at graduation. It was the silence of vindication. My parents, the lifelong accountants who lived by the ledger, had just been legally reprimanded for their attempt at criminal fraud, all because of $2,100 and their inability to accept my success without controlling it. Knowing their capacity for relentless spite, I didn't stop there. I immediately contacted an attorney. Using the evidence of the police visit, the documented harassment of my employer, and the recorded coercion voicemail, I quickly secured a temporary restraining order. The order barred Richard and Carol from contacting me, my workplace, or my new residence in Chicago. The financial leash they had tried to snap back around my neck was severed forever, replaced by an ironclad legal boundary. My biggest life milestone, my graduation, was ghosted. But in the weeks that followed, I gained something far more valuable than their fleeting approval: absolute freedom, and the knowledge that I could stand my ground against their toxic financial tyranny. I was no longer their investment, waiting for a return. I was the architect of my own life. The finality of the restraining order felt like the definitive end of a long, toxic chapter. My parents, Richard and Carol, the accountants, had spent their lives trying to calculate and control my worth, only to see their entire strategy crumble over $2,100, the exact sum they diverted for a car. Their final act of desperation, weaponizing the police, had been their absolute undoing, validating every boundary I had ever tried to set.
As I, Maya, settled back into my work routine in Chicago, the events served not as trauma, but as a chilling clarity. Their conditional love wasn't based on what I achieved, a computer science degree, but on whether my life served their immediate financial convenience. They chose their need for $2,100 liquidity and Chloe's superficial desire for a new SUV over my once-in-a-lifetime achievement. Their calculated choice had led directly to their humiliation, professional reprimand, and legal isolation. The true victory wasn't just avoiding the false theft charge. It was the unconditional freedom I earned by standing my ground. I didn't pay the extortionate debt. I didn't succumb to the professional sabotage. I faced the shocking threat of law enforcement and used my evidence, my truth, to dismantle their lies. The cost of my defense was a few sleepless nights and an attorney fee, but the return was immeasurable. I was no longer the student striving for a strong return on their investment. I was the young professional, financially independent and emotionally unburdened. The diploma, once a symbol of their expectation, now truly represented my achievement. The lesson was stark. They taught me that financial control was their ultimate leverage, but I taught them that absolute truth is the ultimate power. They wanted the $2,100 to maintain their illusion of control and wealth. They lost their daughter, their dignity, and their legal standing. The story of the empty chairs at my graduation and the subsequent police report will forever be the benchmark of their character. But for me, it is the benchmark of my strength. I moved forward into a future they can never touch, a future built on my own merit and secured by my unwavering refusal to be controlled. The ledger was finally balanced, and they were the ones who were found to be perpetually in the red.